He was the most dominant basketball player on the planet, and he might have been the most joyless. He never smiled after a basket. He never pumped his fist. For more than a decade, he watched flashy players preen for the cameras, and he quietly despised everything they represented. Basketball was not a show. Basketball was a discipline, a craft, almost a religion. And anyone who turned it into entertainment was, in his eyes, disrespecting the game itself. Then, in the fall of 1979, a 20-year-old rookie with a smile you could see from the last row of the arena wrapped his arms around this man's neck on national television, screaming and celebrating like they had just won a championship. It was the first game of an 82-game season. The big man was horrified. That big man was Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. The rookie was Earvin Magic Johnson. And what happened between these two opposites over the next 10 years didn't just change both of their lives. It changed the entire NBA. In this video, we're going deep into one of the most fascinating relationships in sports history. The stone-faced legend who thought emotion was weakness, and the human fireworks display who believed joy was the whole point. You'll hear about the night Kareem pulled Magic aside and coldly told him to never celebrate like that again. You'll hear about the one simple question Magic asked in training camp that started to melt the ice. And you'll hear about the game, years later, when the most serious man in basketball did something so out of character that his own teammates could barely believe what they were watching. By the end, the man who hated Showboats had become something nobody ever expected. And to understand how far he traveled, you first need to understand where all that ice came from in the first place. Long before he was Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, he was Lou Alcindor, a shy, freakishly tall kid from New York City. Born in Harlem in 1947 and raised in the Dykeman Street projects of Upper Manhattan, he was 6'8" by the 8th grade. Imagine that for a second. 13 years old, towering over grown men on the subway, never able to blend in, never able to disappear into a crowd. Every room he entered, every street he walked down, people stared. People pointed. People demanded things from him before he had said a single word. That does something to a person. Some kids in that situation become performers. They lean into the attention and learn to feed off it. Young Lou went the other way. He built walls. He retreated into books, into jazz records, into his own mind. His father was a police officer and a classically trained musician, a quiet, serious man who rarely showed emotion. The son absorbed that same temperament. Privacy became precious. Silence became armor. On the court, he was a phenomenon, like New York had never seen. At Power Memorial Academy, he won 71 straight games and 3 straight city Catholic championships. Newspapers wrote about him constantly. College recruiters circled like seagulls, and through all of it, his high school coach shielded him from the press, which meant that by the time he arrived at UCLA in 1965, he was already famous and already deeply uncomfortable with fame. The pattern was set. The world wanted a show. He wanted to be left alone to master his craft. And at UCLA, he met the man who would pour concrete over that foundation. John Wooden. Wooden was a soft-spoken Midwestern schoolteacher who happened to be the greatest college basketball coach who ever lived. And Wooden's entire philosophy was the opposite of flash. He preached fundamentals, repetition, humility, and self-control. He famously spent the first practice of every season teaching players how to put on their socks correctly. Not because socks were exciting, but because blisters lose games and details win them. Wooden had no patience for hot-dogging, for taunting, for anything that put the individual above the team. Do your job, respect the game, and let the scoreboard do your talking. For a young man already inclined towards seriousness, this was gasoline on a fire. Alcindor dominated college basketball so completely that the NCAA literally changed the rules because of him, banning the dunk in 1967 in what everyone understood was a direct response to his dominance. Think about the message that sent. The sport's governing body looked at the most exciting play in basketball, a play this young man performed better than anyone alive, and outlawed it. So what did he do? He didn't complain. He went into the gym and perfected a different weapon, a sweeping, unblockable hook shot released high above his head. The shot that would one day be known as the sky hook, the most reliable, most fundamentally sound, and least flashy signature move in the history of the sport. It was almost poetic. They took away the slam, so he built a cathedral. He won 3 national championships at UCLA and lost a total of 2 games in 3 seasons. But the more important transformation was happening off the court. These were the late 1960s. Cities were burning, the civil rights movement was fracturing and radicalizing. And Alcindor, a thoughtful, widely read young black man, was paying attention. In 1968, he boycotted the Olympics in protest of racial injustice in America, a decision that brought him an avalanche of hate mail and death threats. He was studying history, studying religion, questioning everything. And in 1971, after winning his first NBA championship, he announced to the world that he had converted to Islam and taken a new name: Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. To understand the Kareem who would one day glare at a hugging rookie, you have to understand what the 1970s did to him. Because the decade that made him the best basketball player alive also made him one of the most misunderstood men in American sports. The Milwaukee Bucks had won a coin flip for the right to draft him in 1969, and he delivered immediately. Rookie of the Year. Then, in just his second season, an NBA championship, sweeping the Baltimore Bullets in the 1971 finals, while winning the league MVP. He was 24 years old, already a champion, already the most skilled big man the game had ever produced. By any logic, he should have been the most celebrated athlete in America. He wasn't, and the reasons say as much about America as they do about him. His name change confused and angered a lot of fans who wanted their heroes simple and familiar. His political views were outside the mainstream, his religion made people uncomfortable, and his personality gave the press nothing to work with. He didn't do charming quotes, he didn't perform gratitude. Reporters would approach him after games and find a man who answered in short, precise sentences and clearly wanted the interaction to end. So they wrote that he was sullen, moody, aloof, difficult, the label stuck and hardened into a cage. Here was arguably the most intellectually curious superstar in the history of American team sports, a man who devoured history books and could lecture on jazz and world religions. And the public shorthand for him became a single word: cold. And in fairness, he gave that reputation plenty to feed on. In Milwaukee, he was open about feeling culturally isolated. And in 1975, he requested a trade to either New York or Los Angeles. The Lakers won that sweepstakes, sending a package of players to Milwaukee for the best player on earth. But Los Angeles didn't thaw him. In the 1977 season opener, Milwaukee rookie Kent Benson caught him with a hard elbow, and Kareem responded with a punch that broke his own hand and knocked Benson to the floor. It cost him a massive fine and 2 months of headlines about his temper. The brooding giant narrative wrote itself. Here's the part people forget. Through all of this, he was magnificent. In the late 1970s, he was routinely leading the league in every advanced measure of value, stacking MVP trophies, 6 of them by 1980, more than any player ever. But the Lakers around him were mediocre. The Forum had empty seats, and the NBA itself was in serious trouble. Television ratings were terrible. The finals were being shown on tape delay after the late local news because networks didn't believe enough people cared. The league had an image problem, a style problem, and a star problem. Its best player was a man who played the game like a grandmaster playing chess, brilliantly and silently, and who wanted absolutely nothing to do with selling it. Kareem's view of basketball by 1979 was fully formed and completely sincere. The game was serious work. Excellence was the only statement worth making. Emotion was a resource to be conserved over an 82-game grind, not spilled all over the floor in October. And the players who mugged for cameras, who danced and taunted and turned the sport into a circus, were tourists. He had seen flashy players come and go. He had outlasted all of them with fundamentals and discipline. His conclusion was simple. The show was the enemy of the craft. And then the summer of 1979 happened, and the universe decided to run an experiment. What happens when you take the most serious man in basketball and hand him the most joyful teammate the sport has ever produced? Everything about Earvin Johnson Jr. was the opposite of Kareem's story. He grew up in Lansing, Michigan, one of 10 kids in a loud, loving, working-class family. His father worked the line at General Motors and hauled trash on weekends, and young Earvin worked alongside him. Where Kareem's height had isolated him, Earvin's size never dimmed his light. He was the kid who knew everybody in the neighborhood, who talked to everybody, whose smile arrived in a room 3 seconds before he did. A local sports writer watched the 15-year-old put up a monster stat line one night and decided this kid needed a nickname: Magic. His own mother thought it was too much. It turned out to be an understatement. Magic played basketball the way kids play it in their driveways, with pure delight, except he did it at 6'9" with the vision of a point guard and the imagination of a jazz soloist. No-look passes, full-court bombs, fast breaks that felt like parades. He won a state title at Everett High School, then took Michigan State to the 1979 NCAA championship, beating Larry Bird's undefeated Indiana State team in the most-watched college basketball game in history. That single night, Magic versus Bird, was a preview of the war that would define the next decade. But first, Magic was headed west. And here's where fate gets almost absurd. The Lakers owned the #1 pick in the 1979 draft, but not their own pick. Years earlier, they had acquired a future first-rounder from the New Orleans Jazz as compensation when the Jazz signed Gail Goodrich. That pick landed in a coin flip between the Lakers and the Chicago Bulls for the top selection. The Bulls called heads. The coin came up tails. The best player in franchise history arrived on the flip of a quarter. At almost the same moment, a flamboyant real estate tycoon named Jerry Buss bought the Lakers, and Buss had a vision that would have made old-school basketball men choke on their coffee. He wanted games to feel like Hollywood premieres. He wanted celebrities in the front row, dancers on the floor, an event, a spectacle, a show. He even had a name for it: Showtime. So picture Kareem Abdul-Jabbar in the fall of 1979, 32 years old, 6 MVP trophies, a decade of being called cold and difficult by a press he didn't respect. And now his new owner wants to turn the arena into a nightclub. And his new teammate is a rookie who literally goes by the name Magic, and who smiles more in one practice than Kareem had smiled in 10 seasons. If you had asked anyone in basketball to predict how this pairing would go, they would have told you it was oil and water. Some predicted open war. But in training camp, something small happened. Something that told Kareem this kid might be different from every showboat he had ever written off. The rookie approached the legend with a question, not a request for a photo, not an attempt at buddy-buddy charm. A basketball question. Magic wanted to know where Kareem liked to receive the ball in the low post. Which hand, which spot, what made his job easiest? Kareem was genuinely taken aback. He would later admit that in 10 years as a professional, no guard had ever asked him that. 10 years of being the centerpiece of every offense he played in, and not one teammate had ever thought to ask the big man how he wanted to be served. The loudest, flashiest rookie in America turned out to be the first one humble enough to ask. It was a tiny crack in the ice. Magic wasn't there to take anything from him. Magic was there to win, and he understood that winning in Los Angeles started with the captain. Then came October 12, 1979. The San Diego Sports Arena, Magic Johnson's first professional game and the first game of the Showtime era, though nobody knew it yet. And the basketball gods, showing a flair for drama, scripted an ending designed to detonate the exact collision this video is about. The game came down to the final seconds, with the Lakers trailing by 1. San Diego botched a possession and turned the ball over with 2 seconds left. The Lakers inbounded to Kareem near the free throw line, an absurd distance for a center's shot. It didn't matter. He rose, uncoiled the skyhook, and buried it at the buzzer. Lakers win by a single point. In Game 1 of 82. For Kareem, this was a nice piece of business. A road win in October, secured by the shot he had been perfecting since the NCAA banned his dunk. File it away, get on the bus, 60 seconds of satisfaction, move on. That's how a professional handles October. That is not how Magic Johnson handled October. The rookie came sprinting at him like the arena was on fire. He leaped on Kareem, wrapped his arms around the big man's neck, hugging him, squeezing him, practically choking him, screaming with joy in front of a national audience. The broadcast crew was stunned and, with the announcer remarking that the kid was celebrating like his team had just won the NCAA championship. Kareem stood there, 7'2" of pure bewilderment, being climbed like a tree by a 20-year-old who had officially been his teammate for 1 game. Teammates were shocked. Kareem was somewhere past shocked. His entire adult life had been organized around emotional control, and this rookie had just spent a season's worth of emotion on opening night. In the locker room, the captain summoned the rookie, and Kareem delivered the message with the warmth of a tax notice. He told Irvin never to do that again. He explained that there were 81 more games to play, that they could not run this hot for a whole season, that if they burned like this in October, they wouldn't survive to Thanksgiving. Kareem would later admit that in that moment he was genuinely worried, thinking this level of emotion was simply unsustainable. Around the locker room, teammates watched the rookie get scolded by the most decorated player alive and wondered how the kid would take it. And this is the moment, right here. Because how Magic responded tells you everything about why this partnership became what it became. He didn't sulk, he didn't shrink, he didn't fire back with disrespect. Magic walked away, thought about it, and then came back to the 7-footer, looked all the way up at him, and delivered his answer. If Kareem hit a game-winning shot like that 81 more times, Magic was going to jump into his arms 81 more times. And the most serious man in professional basketball broke. He laughed, a real laugh, the kind teammates rarely saw. Because what could you even say to that? The kid wasn't performing for cameras. There were no cameras in the locker room. The joy was real. It went all the way down. Kareem had spent a decade building a detector for phonies, for showboats, for players whose flash was a costume covering an empty game. And his detector was telling him something confusing. This kid's flash wasn't a costume. It was just what winning felt like to him, escaping through every pore. Kareem didn't transform overnight. Ice that thick doesn't melt in a day. Through that first season, observers described their relationship as professional coexistence rather than friendship. The veteran kept his distance, watched, evaluated. But the evaluation kept coming back positive. The rookie played the right way. He rebounded like a forward, defended, sprinted the floor, and above all he passed, delivering the ball to Kareem exactly where Kareem had told him he wanted it. The flash always served the team. The no-look pass wasn't for the crowd. It was because the no-look pass got there before the defense did. Wooden's most famous student was slowly realizing something uncomfortable. By every standard he actually cared about, unselfishness, preparation, winning, the Showboat was fundamentally sound. And the results were undeniable. The Lakers won 60 games. Kareem, rejuvenated, played some of the best basketball of his career and would collect his record 6th MVP. The forum filled up. The fast break became appointment viewing, and the team stormed into the 1980 NBA Finals against Julius Erving and the Philadelphia 76ers. What happened in that series is one of the greatest stories in the history of American sports. And it ends with a sentence that would have been unthinkable 8 months earlier. Through 5 games, Kareem was a monster. He was averaging over 30 points and dominating both ends. But in Game 5, with the series tied, he severely sprained his ankle. He returned to the floor anyway, essentially on one leg, and finished with 40 points to win the game. It might be the most underrated performance of his career. But the ankle was wrecked. The Lakers flew to Philadelphia for Game 6 without him, leaving the captain in Los Angeles to rest in case the series reached a 7th game. Nobody gave them a chance. Las Vegas made Philadelphia overwhelming favorites. The plan, as far as the world was concerned, was to survive Game 6 and pray Kareem could walk by Game 7. Magic Johnson had a different plan. On the flight to Philadelphia, the 20-year-old rookie sat in Kareem's usual seat and told his teammates not to worry, because Magic was here. Then coach Paul Westhead made one of the boldest decisions in finals history, having Magic jump center in Kareem's place. What followed was a performance that people still struggle to believe. A rookie point guard, playing center, forward, and guard, sometimes all in the same possession, put up 42 points, 15 rebounds, and 7 assists. The Lakers didn't survive Game 6. They demolished Philadelphia by 16 points to win the championship. Magic was named Finals MVP. He remains the only rookie in history to win it. And in the delirious visitors' locker room in Philadelphia, with cameras rolling and champagne flying, what did Magic do? He grabbed the microphone and spoke directly to the injured legend, watching from his home 3,000 miles away. He told the big fella that they loved him, that they did it for him, and that he wanted him to get up and dance tonight, bad ankle and all. Sit with that for a second. The rookie had just delivered one of the greatest individual performances in finals history. This was his moment, his stage, his championship coronation. And his first instinct, on live television, was to hand the moment to the 33-year-old veteran who had scolded him in October for hugging too hard. That wasn't strategy. That was just who Earvin Johnson was. And somewhere in Los Angeles, watching that broadcast on a busted ankle, the man who hated Showboats felt something shift. Because here's what Kareem had actually been hating all those years. It was never really the smiling. It was never the passes behind the back. What he hated was selfishness wearing a costume of entertainment. Players who put themselves above the game. And this kid, the flashiest player alive, had just used the biggest spotlight of his life to shine it on somebody else. Kareem would later write, in his own autobiography, that he saw Magic's arrival as a positive for both the team and himself, that he had never needed or wanted to be alone on the mountain top, that sharing the load lifted a burden off him. Read those words carefully. A burden. For 10 years, he had carried franchises, expectations, and a hostile press completely alone. The Showboat didn't steal his spotlight. The Showboat took the weight. What unfolded over the next decade was the greatest show in basketball history and the quiet transformation of the man at the center of it. Showtime became a dynasty. Pat Riley took over the bench in 1981 and turned the fast break into a philosophy. The Forum became the hottest ticket in Hollywood, with Jack Nicholson courtside and the Laker girls on the floor, and the whole event humming exactly the way Jerry Buss had dreamed. The Lakers won the title again in 1982. They met Larry Bird's Celtics in 3 brutal finals, and the Magic vs. Bird rivalry, born in that 1979 college game, dragged the entire NBA out of the tape delay era and into a golden age. And through all of it, the engine of the machine remained the 2-man partnership between the oldest player on the floor and the most exuberant one. They were never the same person, and that was the point. Kareem remained reserved, bookish, private. Magic remained a one-man festival. But on the court, they developed something close to telepathy, and off the court, the respect deepened year by year into genuine love. Magic pestered the big man relentlessly, joking with him, dragging him into conversations, refusing to let him retreat all the way into his shell. Teammates noticed the captain loosening in ways they had never seen. He joked more. He let people in more. Kareem himself acknowledged the surprising truth of it, reflecting that despite the 12-year age gap, a generational gap really, the two of them had enough in common to go out and make the fans happy, and that this was why they hung together, making the fans happy. From the man who once treated the audience as an intrusion, that sentence was a revolution. The single greatest chapter of the partnership came in 1985. The Lakers had never beaten the Celtics in the finals, not once in 8 tries stretching back decades, and the ghosts of all those defeats hung over the franchise. Game 1 in Boston Garden that year became known as the Memorial Day Massacre, a 34-point annihilation in which Kareem, now 38 years old, looked ancient. He was outrun, outmuscled, and embarrassed. The Boston press wrote his basketball obituary overnight, openly declaring him finished. What happened next became legend inside that Lakers locker room. Kareem stood up in the film session and made his teammates watch every one of his mistakes, taking full responsibility. He personally apologized. He asked Riley for permission to bring his father on the team bus to Game 2. And on that quiet ride to Boston Garden, the old man sat beside his dad and gathered himself. Then he went out and dropped 30 points on the Celtics to even the series. When the Lakers closed it out in Game 6, on the Garden's famous parquet floor, becoming the first visiting team ever to win a championship in that building, the finals MVP was the 38-year-old center everyone had buried 5 games earlier. And the images from that series tell you how far he had come. Kareem, fist raised, roaring. Kareem embracing Magic, the stone face cracked wide open in the most emotional victory of his life. And the exchange between the two men flowed in both directions, which is the part of this story people miss. Everyone can see what Magic gave Kareem. Fewer people talk about what Kareem gave Magic. Magic studied the older man's preparation, his conditioning, his professionalism, the martial arts training, and the yoga that kept a giant's body playing elite basketball into his 40s. Magic called him the smartest athlete he ever met in his life, and in the 1987 finals against Boston, the student unveiled his tribute. Game 4, Boston Garden, final seconds, Lakers down by 1. Magic drove across the lane and instead of forcing a layup into the trees, lofted a running hook shot over 3 Hall of Famers. It splashed through to win the game. Afterward, Magic grinned and gave the shot a name: the Junior Skyhook. The showman had borrowed the craftsman's signature, and the craftsman could not have been prouder. Kareem had spent 2 decades believing flash and fundamentals were enemies. His best friend on the team had just proven they were dance partners. By the time Kareem's final season arrived in 1989, the transformation was complete in a way that would have been science fiction in 1979. The league staged a farewell tour for him, and in every arena, in every city. The man once branded as basketball's coldest star stood at center court accepting gifts, rocking chairs, jazz records, standing ovations, and he received all of it with visible warmth. Smiling, waving, letting the love land. Sports writers who had covered him for 2 decades could hardly process what they were seeing. The walls were down. He finished his career as the NBA's all-time leading scorer, a record that would stand for 34 years, with 6 championships, 6 MVPs, and 19 All-Star selections. But ask him what changed his career, and he pointed to the partnership. 5 of those 6 rings came with the kid who wouldn't stop hugging him. 2 years later, the friendship faced something far heavier than basketball. On November 7, 1991, Magic Johnson stood at a podium and told the world he had tested positive for HY5 and was retiring immediately. In 1991, most of the public understood that diagnosis as a death sentence. The announcement shook the entire planet, and it devastated the men who had shared that locker room. Kareem stood by his friend publicly and privately, lending his voice to the fight against the fear and misinformation surrounding the disease. And Magic, being Magic, refused to follow anyone's script for how his story would end. He came back to win the All-Star Game MVP in 1992. starred on the Olympic Dream Team, became a billionaire businessman who transformed investment in underserved communities, and along the way became a co-owner of the Dodgers and eventually part of an ownership group of an NFL franchise. The smile never went anywhere. Decades later, he remains one of the most beloved figures in the history of American sports. And the two men grew old as friends. Real friends. When the Lakers unveiled Kareem's statue outside their arena in 2012, Magic was there. When Magic's statue went up in 2004, and through every Lakers celebration since, the two Showtime pillars kept finding their way back to each other. One still talking enough for both of them, the other still perfectly content to let him. Kareem became a celebrated author and columnist, writing thoughtfully about culture, history, and race, finally showing the wider world the mind that had been there all along behind the stone face. And when he writes or speaks about Magic, the warmth is unmistakable. The old man knows exactly what that rookie's arrival meant to his life, and he has spent his later years saying so openly in a way the young Kareem never could have. So what do we actually take from this story? Start with the obvious irony. The man who hated Showboats didn't just meet one. He won 5 championships with the greatest showman the sport has ever produced. In an era literally named Showtime, playing for an owner who wanted basketball to feel like Hollywood. If you had described this future to the brooding superstar of 1978, he would have walked out of the room. And yet it became the happiest, most successful stretch of his career. But the deeper lesson is about what each man actually was underneath the label. Kareem's coldness was never emptiness. It was protection, built brick by a shy kid who grew too tall to hide, hardened by a country that punished him for his mind, his faith, and his honesty. And Magic's flash was never vanity. It was generosity. His game was built on giving, on the pass, on making everyone around him better, and making sure they felt it. When the two finally saw each other clearly, past the labels, they discovered they had been the same kind of player all along. Winners obsessed with the team, allergic to selfishness. One expressed it in silence. One expressed it at full volume. Kareem needed Magic to learn that joy is not the enemy of seriousness. That letting people in costs less than keeping them out. That the show, when it comes from a true heart, is not a betrayal of the craft, but a celebration of it. And Magic needed Kareem too, needed the standard, the discipline, the living proof that excellence is a daily practice and not a mood. The junior skyhook that won a championship game was the whole relationship compressed into one shot. Flash, built on fundamentals. Showtime, anchored by substance. Basketball got lucky. The sport was dying on tape delay, and the cure turned out to be a partnership between two men who should never have worked. Instead, they built the dynasty that carried the NBA into its golden age and set the stage for everything that followed. And it all traces back to one October night in San Diego. A buzzer-beating skyhook. A rookie flying through the air with his arms wide open. A legend, stiff as a statue, informing him there were 81 games left. And a kid looking 7 feet up into the most guarded face in sports, promising that if the big fella did it 81 more times, he was getting 81 more hugs. Kareem laughed that day. It took him 10 years to admit it, but that was the day the ice started to break. The Showboat won. And so did he. If you enjoyed this story, hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dive basketball documentaries. Until next time.